Oh, this is Broe, and we're talking today about a very important topic, hives. So I'm going to take the next 5 to 10 minutes to explain the concept of hives that I've created and outlined. And this video was put together in an effort to bring awareness and some congruency to language around, hippie communities, sustainable, regenerative communities that are working together to build what is sometimes called the new paradigm. More specifically, when referring to the new paradigm, what I'm talking about is living in relation with the earth, with other humans, all the creatures of the earth, and whatever else might be out there in a spiritual or ET realm, in a peaceful, harmonious, sustainable, and at this time, a more emphasis is even put on regenerative way due to the destruction and at times very poor condition of the earth as it's been left by the humanoids over the last few thousand years or millennia. A lot of our work is moving from a state of oppression and destruction through to a place of sustainability and then onward to regenerating while maintaining peaceful relations with what you might refer to as the matrix, which includes the public, the mass mind consciousness, and the systems that hold all that together that you may or may not be conscious of. I'll be referring to that as the matrix. So our diagram starts at the beginning. I'm going to talk about everything in succession. I just drew it all out. It's very easy that way. But we're going to start in the center, so don't worry about the X, Y's, and Z's for just a second. What I have here is an economic trade center. It's more commonly would be known as a city. This is a place where people can essentially go for revenue. So the city model that you see on planet Earth right now, Calgary, Edmonton, Moscow, New York, London, this sort of thing, what's keeping people in those cities is the generating of revenue. And then what's happening from there is they're building a life around that. They're buying a house or a condo, having kids, having friends, having community, and therefore they're happily living and dying a Calgarian, so to speak. So what's happening with cities is they're some of the darkest, dirtiest, grimiest places, and there's tons of work to be done there. Most of the population are in cities, so that would be easy to find enough people within that population to do that work. However, there's also a migrating out of the cities, which you can see represented by the Y and the Z, which we'll get to, that is happening, and which is essential to what we need to do, because cities as a percentage of the landmass of Earth are extremely small. So a lot of the regeneration has to happen outside the cities. And because of some of the practices, principles, technologies, etc., that we will be dealing with as we build the new paradigm, it will be important for us to move sometimes a little further away to play with some of our technologies so the suburbans don't show up, sort of thing. Back to the city. I'm speaking first to the X. X represents what I'm going to call a city hive. I'll describe that briefly, then describe the model, and maybe come back to the X, Y, Z. So a city hive is more than just a community house. And when I put an X and a Y and a Z here, I'm hopefully speaking to what I would call an optimized city hive. There's plenty of struggling city hives, startup hives, and mini hives. There's not even that many of these two. We'll get to those. I'm not speaking of struggling ones. I'm speaking of optimized operating ones that can work together in collaboration and community to support different expansions, which are the Y and the Z, which we're getting to in a second. So a city hive is a community house that has systems, principles that are tied to the bigger picture of sustainability, regeneration. Now, city hives are also where we start. So the model starts in the cities because that's where most of the people are. There's lots of city hives of different magnitudes of size, strength, optimization, etc. And where your current living situation is, and this is a different conversation. This is just a model for you to maybe incorporate into some of your language and your thinking. So the idea behind this model is that once you have a density of city hives, I'm using the corner of this economic center, so you could call this, for example, Northwest Calgary. what you're aiming to do first as a greater community is to have a couple of optimized city hives working in a relatively close area. The idea of close proximity is extremely important. Now, please appreciate that this is happening here in what we might be calling the Northwest, and I totally appreciate that this is actually, no, it actually is the Northwest on here, so that's great too. The idea is that it should be happening in all corners, in all cities, everywhere. Awakening is not something that's isolated to Northwest Calgary or Northwest Timbuktu or wherever you might be. Awakening is happening anywhere and everywhere that humanoids, which are sparks of spirit, having a human experience are, which is all over the earth, but concentrated in economic centers known as cities. All over the city, this is already happening. We'll come back to how to create optimal city hives in separate videos and what that looks like, what defines a city hive, all this sort of stuff. But the idea is it's a community house, 4 to 10 people working together in some kind of way to eventually work with each other. So you're starting to see trade and people moving from different houses that might be themed or bigger or more expensive or whatever. Once you have a certain density of city hives, then there becomes the support necessary to spawn. This little Y here would be our first Y, our first startup hive. So a startup hive is outside the city, within range of the city, because a startup hive is very dependent on the city, so there's frequent transportation. So you might call that less than an hour, but it will obviously depend on where you are on the planet. It's a commutable distance. It's 5 to 50, maybe 150 acres. It's 5 to 15, maybe 25 adults at most, all working together, again, as part of the bigger building a more sustainable, regenerative relationship with all beings of the earth, including the earth, and peace with the matrix is really kind of the two pieces it boils down to. So that's what's happening here at Y. Now this is when you're starting to introduce gardening practices and niche revenue opportunities such as hemp farming, orchard caring, some kind of special mechanics, what have you. Again, details of startup hives a little more for in a separate video. But the idea is there's a ratio of about, in my estimation, about 3 to 10 city hives that it will take to support a startup hive. So you notice the startup hives are a little further apart here. This is obviously not to scale, but it is relatively to scale, in the sense that in this corner of the city, and this is ideally happening in all corners of the city, which, you know, tie in your sacred geometry, is creating essentially a new paradigm layering over top of the old paradigm city. So the light and the dark, the new paradigm and the old paradigm are coexisting at the same time, ideally peacefully. And slowly what's happening through the development of these hives is as things change in the economy, as things change with the global climate changes and further awakening changes, and just big things that are coming in the earth, the hives, people of the hives, the community that it supports are all working together to kind of hold space, hold the light, as well as just stay out of harm's way, which is a big thing too. And just, it's one of those things where, you know, people of the old paradigm, if they knew better, they would do better. People of the new paradigm, we know better, so this is how we do better. That's kind of the idea. So, Y represents your startup hive. Lots of integration with the city. Some people might be working in the city. Some people might be working at local businesses, orchards, farms, whatever. Once you have a certain concentration of those, maybe half a dozen to a dozen, you then spawn Z, which is the mini hive. And things get really exciting when you move to the mini hive. Tamara in Portugal, I have a whole list of them. There's a list of a few mini hives operating around the world, maybe a dozen. How optimized and well they're running would make a great documentary. It might even be out there. But now we're looking at, you know, a couple hundred people, some serious economic power, even wherever you're located. There's one, I forget the name of it, where they're just like literally kind of taking over the town. which is an example of something that happens and will happen more and more, which is a great thing. Because most towns, which are just economic, trade, entertainment, etc. centers, are done in a very old paradigm way, and are throwing their garbage into the local river and that sort of stuff. And so when you birth mini hives, you start to have the resources of a small town or a hamlet, and really magical things happen. The most magical thing that happens here, in my personal opinion, is the birth of the school. Because the school is what will take the little ones from the old paradigm and drop them straight into the new paradigm. It's not new news that the way to control the masses is to control what goes into the ears and brains and behaviors and conditioning of the children. So one of the massive problems with our world and the perpetuation of the destruction and the non-fluoridated masses, if you will, is the K-12 education system and all the supportings of that, including the television programs and that. And I'm not saying there's not some good teachers and some good stuff in there, but I'm saying it's mostly not so good, and mostly could be, if we can do better, we do better. So that's what we're doing here. Not that there won't be some educational programs and even some schools in here, but your mini hives will support a magnitude of school similar to what you're used to in the Matrix, and that will really allow for full sustainable living. Now there's also one other stage, and it's not on this this board, and it's not on this board for a reason, because you can't get there by road. You can only get there by air. And I'm not sure exactly what that looks like yet. If you're familiar with Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand's popular book from 100 or so years ago, everyone disappears to this place. And it's actually very similar to what I'm referring to. That's what I call the full hive. So you'll notice these are kind of a progression. There's the city, the startup, the mini. So there's both actual physical growth in size as well as depth of consciousness that's expanding. And so what would come after this, the full hive, and the reason I've used XYZ, and there is no letter, in the 26 letter alphabet anyways, for the full hive, is because it's a bit other dimensional. It's a place of free energy, it's a place of true peace, that sort of stuff. So it's a little bit out there. I think most of the XYZ is what's kind of on the plate for now, which might be this lifetime. Not to put limitations on anything, but I think where we're starting is right here, at the basic. So I'm encouraging you, if this model and where it's going sounds exciting to you, check into the videos where I'm going to go really into the mini hives, the startup hives, and the city hives. I'm also going to speak specifically in those videos to the challenges that they face and the opportunities that they introduce into the community, into the development of the new paradigm, which is really, really the powerful stuff. Because these guys are all running into problems and failing for very kind of could see before you get there kind of reasons that kind of knowledge could maybe speed things up a little bit. And really where the power of this entire model comes in is not my way of describing it. It's actually the interconnectedness of all of these people that fuel these hives. It's the trade, it's the love, it's the healing that will go on. And what we're going to see over the next decade or two is an increased number of people. The baby boomers and their folks are going to be a huge number, as well as all the mental illness people, which are coming from all age brackets. They're going to be coming to us for healing of a different kind, something where you can't just put a pill in your mouth from a large pharmaceutical company. And so a lot of what we're doing is building the foundation to hold them. So that is to help heal many people who might come from different backgrounds and belief systems, but are still part of the human family, which we are all part of. So anyways, I just want to wrap things up here. Really encourage you to get involved with Startup or City Hives by you, so that we can work together to start to really get here. It'd be nice to see a couple hundred mini hives operating around the world, because that would mean there's thousands of startup hives and hundreds of thousands of city hives, which means there's some serious change, because the change is going to come from us. We have to be the change we want to be, and I feel that if you can connect to your soul journey, you can step into the knowing better, and by communitying up, you can start to do that better, so we can move into a more sustainable, regenerative, and relationship with the earth and all its creatures, and peace with the matrix, and those who are awakening at different rates and in different ways. Namaste. Hope to see you.